Have your energy levels fallen due to the winter months arriving and spending so much time indoors? Well, obviously, I'd recommend improve your diet, exercise, obviously take care of all that stuff. But much like the player FalleN, and his name for that matter, dropped off where it mattered and now is trying to pick himself up by joining Team Liquid. Well, you can come and join my Team Liquid, Team Gamer Subs. Look, we got the acai blueberry, it's a fainter taste with a solid base, a bit like naff. We got the watermelon ice, it's understated, really nice. Elige, of course. Then we got the strawberry burst, sweet but with a strong flavour, like my boy Stewie2K. We've got the blue raz, it's bold and fresh. Still be to be determined how much I like it, kind of like Grim. And then finally, of course, we've got the lemon and limeade. You know, 2 flavours, both nice, you know, but with that sour little kick at the end. So two-faced FalleN, really, innit? Now get 10% off your next order by using the code Thorin at gamersubs.gg. Let's hope that FalleN's contribution to Team Liquid isn't only 10% of what the team needs, right? As opposed to the 20% that a fifth of the team would require. Obviously, that's not really the way it works. Now, FalleN is Team Liquid's new 5th player, and he's replacing the already departed, because we're already aware of this, Twistzz, which in itself is kind of a crazy move, right? You look at Twistzz, you thought, there's a player that's going to be there for years and years. I remember saying a couple of years ago, you ever get rid of Twistzz and Elige, first of all, you're going to both think as players, like, we could have played together the whole time. Like, mate, we could be like Dwayne Wade and LeBron, or we could be like Kareem and Mad. Like, this could be amazing. What, we split up after a couple of years because they've just got such potential due to being young. They're so good now, and they've reached such heights already in Team Liquid together in many different lineups. So it's unthinkable that we've arrived at this point, but I get it, because you know what? As I'm going to use my usual format, was he the right player to remove? Then is FalleN the right player to add? Twistzz is the right player to remove. If I have to remove one of the 5 players of Team Liquid now, I'm picking Twistzz, because let's think of what Twistzz represents. He was a superstar. He was a potential world's best player. He was NA's best player at one point in time, a couple of years ago, arguably. But he was one of the least impactful players on Team Liquid for the majority of the year, quite frankly. Now, that's on the heels as well of a drop-off in the latter sort of 3rd to 4th of 2019, when the major thing happened, and then obviously after that, Team Liquid was never quite the same. He was one of the main players that dropped off, basically. Now, I've been told apparently that coincided with some like role change or how he's been used or resources, but nonetheless, he just didn't perform. Like, I watched some of those games, he was just invisible in some of those games, especially against Astralis. So to me, he is the one who never survived that player break before the major, where they went in with that insane winning streak, and then immediately the major, they were having problems, losing best of ones, getting in a precarious situation, and eventually eliminated in the quarterfinals. Many of the others made it. Like, some of them came back to form, recovered. Sure, Nitro had his issues, but in terms of the star players, the ones that really weren't present on the server that you used to be watching like an MVP level player, it was Twistzz. Like, this is a guy who was not just very good, but as I say, he was MVP level. Not only in the past, but particularly in 2019. It's just his problem was he had Elige there who was just so clean in how he was having similar, like, really world-breaking numbers that you kind of had to give most of them to Elige. And Elige was winning clutches at times. So, although to be fair, Twistzz is pretty good at that as well. But just a lot of the most memorable moments in terms of like the big winning moments feels like they were Elige generally, right? And also Elige, quite frankly, of the two of them, I think played better that year against Astralis. The thing for me is, yes, he has super strong mechanics. He even has a fairly decent mentality in big LAN series, contrasted against some of the liquid players of the past and even some of the present lineup that have struggled with that in some senses. I'll never be able to forget when I think of Twistzz. This is why I know why people are mad that he's been removed. Because the first thing you think of if you watched his career is ESL1 New York 2018, that final where they lost in 5 maps to Mousepros. But he was unbelievable. And quite frankly, not only deserved the MVP, but that's one of those ones where you can lose the match but deserve to be a winner. Like, maybe even more so than some of the people on the other team at times. The problem is this. Look at the Team Liquid have. Remember, their curse and their blessing was having like a stacked lineup pretty much the whole time. I mean, Nitro was the only real part that you could have said wasn't like a stacked part in the past lineup. So the problem they have is that then means when you need to make a roster move, as FalleN's MIBR themselves, not necessarily as much when they were MIBR, I found out in the past, it's hard to know who to cut, right? I mean, in his team, obviously you should have a designated 5th that you fuck and then just hang out to dry and then give no help whatsoever in terms of your fans and just let them just eat him alive, basically. It's like the end of that movie, Bloody Perfume, if you want a little spoiler there. It's not like you're going to watch that. You're probably the kind of pleb who watches Marvel movies. So, here's the thing. And by the way, that's a way better movie with supernatural components. Think of this team. Elige is still a beast. Still one of the best players in the world. Probably still NA's best player. Naff came around and is back in pretty good form. Stewie was the in-game leader. and is one of the few aggressive players in the team, so it's hard to remove him on both accounts, and I don't think he's done that great a job as an IGL. He's been okay. Grim's been solid, somewhat. He's a kind of feast and family, either does really well or just kind of does nothing, but I like that in some senses. I can tweak that. It's better than just being an average, like, 1.0 rating player or whatever the fuck people think of those players. So then you have Twistzz. Now, if the role is what's causing his issues, then he can't play his role. So why not get someone who can play that role in that sense? Would make more sense to replace him, right? And put him in another role. Oh, wait, there are none-free in Team Liquid, so he has to go to another team. If it's psychological, which I suspect, then that is fixed by rebooting mentally. Maybe that means self-reflection. Maybe that means some time away from the top. Maybe that means going to a completely different team. Maybe that means going somewhere and thinking, right, this is a fresh chance to just come into a different room as a different person, or who I wanted to be, or who I was in the past. That's what you could do. In that scenario, guess what? Then you probably need to go to another team again, because Team Liquid's never been good with the mental side of the game. It's always been one of the areas they were somewhat weak in. Quite frankly, I think that's probably the area their coaches have been the weakest in that sense, with the exception of Zeus as a general attitude. I mean, let's be real. He got them to number 2 in the world. Tons of finals, beat Navi a bazillion times. Like, he could do it against all those other teams. His problem was he couldn't get them over the hump against Astralis. But even so, the rest of it was good. The problem is, though, he couldn't help them with that part. And part of there is, I think, even a culture clash I've always thought was an issue. So to me, he's the obvious player to cut. Now, if you cut him, as I've been alluding to, yeah, it could come back to haunt you. He could go and be the best player ever. Could be the best NA player. He could beat you a million times. But it's only going to haunt you if you don't think about the context of when you cut him, how, and for what reasons. If you think about those reasons, it's going to come all flooding back. Like, I've always thought it's whack when someone is justifiably removed. They then are like, no, I'm going to show you. Go and play way better elsewhere. It's like, I showed you. It's like, no, you showed me that you played in a way that you couldn't under me. Like, what was wrong there? Like, I've always thought it's such a dysfunctional move. So even though, let's think how to say this. I even think this move is good for Twistzz, as I've kind of alluded to. Like, he never recovered that 2019 form beyond a few series at the end of this year, maybe. And he is so good in terms of potential and raw fundamental mechanics. Like, someone should really take this guy and build around him as a star and ensure he is in his best roles, his best position, and then push him to be great. This is someone you can't allow to rest on their laurels or just be a good player or give you excuses as to why he didn't perform. You have to push the greatness out of a person like this or find a way to lure him towards it. Because at the moment where he's at, he's stuck in a rut. Now, in terms of FalleN, you know what? I'm not going to talk about all his failures directly because I'm going to do that in a different video separately. That's not actually appropriate to this moment necessarily because I actually think this is a pretty good move. I think on the Team Liquid side, none of his failures necessarily are going to impact actually, especially not early on. I think it's very good in the context of the circumstances they find themselves in. What does Team Liquid need? They need an in-game leader. They need leadership generally. Always been their weakest point in the game. I'll give Nitro credit. He did a good job in 2018. Beyond that, I think they had their issues. I think they were fragging out of control. That was what allowed them to win. I think they were a 5-rifle team with NAF as a hybrid. I think they broke a lot of rules and were very, very good, but they didn't get quite where they needed to go. And leadership was one of the areas where, especially when you contrast them against Astralis, listen, Glaive is a hell of an IGL. Nitro was all right or good at times. He wasn't on Glaive's level, let's be real. So to me, that's always been their weakest point. Let's try it out with some of these stars with a better IGL or in a more experienced one. If you look at the HLTV interview with FalleN, he basically said he might not be the in-game leader, but I think it's inevitable. Like, if he doesn't start as it, he will become it in 2 months, 3 months, 5 months, whatever it takes. Unless they're just winning off the bat, he will become the IGL. I'm just telling you that right now. So think about it, right? Think of his style of leadership. Looser style. That's already the wheelhouse of Team Liquid. And with the players you've got, and them being NA players, different kind of fundamentals, as he found out when he had Stewie and Tarek in MIBR, that's exactly the style they want to play, perhaps. Especially because FalleN somewhat lost the smart, I wouldn't even call it loose. It reminds me how the Pauls used to play late game scenarios. They just had ultimate faith in each other and they understood like basic protocols of what each person does and played off each other in those moments. So to me, I think that style somewhat evaded FalleN and the rest of the MIBR players this last year or two anyway. That's why they became something of a joke, because they did the usual drop-off of like absolute best to like pretty good or carried by stars to like we're stealing games and somehow we're still doing it in that period with Yanko and Tarek. And then after that, it's like eventually you get caught. Eventually, whatever was like allowing you to be propped up, when it's pulled away, you just fall. You just fall all the way down as they did in those 9-5 cups where they get reds banged off. So I think what was the basis of that actual style was strong fundamentals. From that, he developed the philosophy how to play. So let's go back to that. Let's reinvent the style of Team Liquid with strong fundamentals, which, by the way, are always going to be worth their weight in gold on LAN. Online, not as much. Online, playing crazy, scrimmy, just playing off raw aim alone. Having some solid fundamentals and protocols, that is what will get you through the games where you don't have everyone fragging out when you're online. That's something that FalleN's teams at times have been very good at. Then let's add in, it's not a throwaway deep comment either, he's been pretty good versus Astralis over his career. Obviously the Karrigan one he used to own, but even the Glaive one, it used to be sort of a 50-50 matchup against the Glaive lineup when they had Kirby. Even the Prime one with Magisk, to 2018 to 2019 one when they were in their era, people forget this. They were one of the teams, arguably the team, that matched up the most evenly with Astralis. Like, yeah, they didn't beat them many times, although they did. But they always had competitive maps. They had like double digits, like maps where they would get like double digits rounds one, and always it would be like 16-13, 16-10, 16-11. No matter which map it was in the series, they would have 3-map series. Like, this guy really, he was doing some work in terms of how well the team that actually was probably only on the brink of maybe coming close to top 5, and they were going against the GOATs in their prime and actually playing pretty well. So that suggests to me that the style of FalleN, or the way he sees the game, even somewhat actually plays well into Astralis. Now, there's not many people in the world you can say that about. He's also been good with star players, and he gets tons of them in Team Liquid. He's also been bad with them towards the end of his career, but we're talking about the early years of his career. And also, more importantly, a secondary effect is if he becomes the in-game leader, it takes the burden off Stewie, doesn't it? Now Stewie can just go back to just being an entry. And with FalleN, he's got an aggressive AWPer. Now he can have someone to back him up. Imagine Stewie running an entry in and jumping over an area, just balls to the wall style, and then FalleN peeks out afterwards and frags the guy who tries to shoot Stewie. Like, that sounds awesome. That sounds really, really good. Even on CT side, these guys can do great work. They also potentially, I think, need an AWPer. Like, Stewie's way too inconsistent as an AWPer. Naf's solid. I think he could actually be a pretty good AWPer if he went device style and just committed to it. But he's more of a hybrid up player at this point in time. He's also pretty good with the rifles. So they need a dedicated AWPer if they want to evolve their style from the kind of 5 rifle style that they were more known for the last couple of years. So for me, FalleN at his best is an AWPer. That is when he is at his strongest. The thing is, Team Liquid also needs something else that FalleN has. Aggression. They need more aggressive players. Elysian and Naf are always going to be more on the end of like middling to passive on the spectrum. So you want balance. You want not just good players, you want players that can do different aspects of the team so that you're well-rounded. You're not just one thing only. So for me, for every device in Magisk, you need a Dupree and a Glaive. For every Cold Zero and FNX, you need a Fur and a FalleN. For every Get Right and Exist, you need a Forest and a Freiburg. Let's add in as well, one thing that almost never betrayed FalleN generally was he's clutch. He's one of the most clutch, especially of IGLs, he's one of the most clutch IGLs that ever played the game. Actually, funny, that's an area where him and Karrigan actually have some similarities. Even somewhat at the end in MIBR. Admittedly, it was mainly against people who feared FalleN and still respected him, and FalleN didn't really respect. That's why I think he had such success at Flashpoint 1, but not elsewhere. But he was looking like he was rolling back the years, to use Henry G's comment. He was a classic there. There was some throwback like 2016, 2017 shit in terms of how he was AWPing on CT side there. And a dangerous CT side AWPer with aggression and who's got players who buying into what he's doing. Because remember, they respect a player like FalleN. They were relative nobodies when he was becoming the absolute best. Some of them obviously played him in Team Liquid, but some of the others were nobody, or they were in just decent teams. So they definitely are going to listen to this guy and give him a shot. So the main issues, because there are issues though, that come with signing this player. He's clearly not the best AWPer or best player of IGL in the world. First of all, let's start with PR. At the moment, Team Liquid's fairly good for PR because they just never say anything. They're actually pretty quiet as a team, right? This guy is going to be a nightmare in terms of PR because he's just been for his whole career ever since he left Luminosity Gaming. After that letter of intent was signed at the beginning of 2016, he's never been. That's when Two-Face emerged. That was like 3/4 of the way through the Dark Knight. That was where the Aaron Eckhart FalleN came along and turned into Two-Face, didn't he? And then consider this. One of the reasons I think he has the PR issues is he is kind of two-faced. Like, he's a guy who can be a really cool guy, a funny guy, in some ways a nice guy, and then he can also flip and be like super cynical, conniving, greedy, selfish, like not taking responsibility. So what's weird is he really has like, he's a complicated person. He's not a simple guy to explain whether you like him or you dislike him. And I've said this in the past, but I'll say it again. He is a very charismatic person in person, in real life, not on a computer screen, in face to face. I've met a lot of pros, a lot of people in esports. I met a lot of people who are big personalities, people who are fan favourites, people who are beloved. I mean, I know, think of people like Twistzz and all these sorts of names throughout history. FalleN, I think, might be the most charismatic player I've ever met. Even when I talk to him, and I know half the things he's saying about business have like an element that's semi-bullshit, or some of that's true, but is some of the rest, or is he framing it this way? I even start to get sort of drawn into the magnetic field and start to, yeah, nice, cool guy. Maybe I'm wrong about this guy. Maybe he's out. Now I'll come right back out of it again. Like I know how to deprogram myself, but my point is that can help when they go to boot camps and as a team. I could see it being really great for the chemistry. I could see it being a bit like when Brady has all that leadership stuff he does with his team and he gets them all to buy in. The problem is the online aspect. I don't want to see this guy complaining about tournament conditions and fucking with people and accusing people of cheating and all that. Like, that's going to be an issue. I also think the whole, like, trash talking angle, I think it could be really good for Team Liquid, but we already tried that with Stewie and it didn't really seem to rub off that much on the others. So, him and Stewie together, that's not bad, but I don't really know if that'll actually be such a massive upside. Similarly, and tied into that, I think contract could be an issue. He's been pretty greedy for the better part of half a decade and is seemingly always scheming on some angle at every moment of the day to get more money, sell this, buy this, sell it. Man alive, it's one thing to want money to do something with it. This guy he's like Smaug. He just wants a giant, like, treasure trove of gold to just sit on, like, oh, look at all my money. Like, I don't get it, man. It's one of those things. He's one of those guys I wish did it just for the love of the game and wish just did it for passion. And then got all the money on the side as well because what a great player he was and the accomplishments he had. But sadly, I feel like there is an element to him that's a little bit impure in that sense. Not to want money, but the way he almost seems like single-minded. And I do think that's something that distracted him the last few years. I think having all these businesses and having all this other shit and all these secondary and third considerations outside of your job inside, I think that did affect him, as well as things like, style going out of fashion, players not being as good, the rest of the scene shit. Yeah, all that stuff, true, losing hunger, motivation, but I think that was part of it. I think that's part of what cracked his identity, is that the guy who came up and had no money suddenly was in a position to have all the money, and maybe even more if he wants it, and he's the one who controls it all, and it's the puppet master and the linchpin to all these teams and these business deals. So I think he let himself get distracted, as sometimes pro sports stars do. So to me, I think when you combine it with the bad PR, I think sometimes this manifests in a shameless manner in how he has manipulated the media and the public and his fans to get the deals done the way he wants and to present a certain image, positive for him and negative for some people, where sometimes the reverse was what I uncovered. But, as I say, a complicated person isn't as simple as black and white in that sense. That's why I say he's two-faced. I don't say, this is his real face, he's just evil, and the other guy's fake. No, that's not as simple. They're both FalleN. It's just you get a different one depending on what light, perspective, circumstance, situation you meet him in. Now, I do think his form is an issue, because he clearly, year on year, got slightly worse. But he's still a solid player, and crucially, I think he's a solid player, not just from mechanics, no, he's a solid player because he has unique strengths. Very aggressive AWPer, no-scope specialist. Good at finding holes. When a less experienced team plays, he'll just find a gap where he can wriggle through or go into an aggressive push somewhere to get the jump on a 1v2 or something. Those 1v2s he wins. He is really good at winning clutches. At least he was up until about most of 2020. He's got mega experience. Not just experience. Not, he's good experience. The guy has experience going back to the end of 1.6. I think he's been playing something like, in terms of the top level, like international level, I think he's been playing something like 11 years now or something. Like a really experienced player. Remember, they have players like Grim, who's barely experienced at all. He's barely ever played a LAN for a top team. In fact, never has. Then consider this. A downside I do think, though, this is my problem, is you've got to make all those strengths work for you. That's all got to be able to translate and come over from MIBR. Now, that's where we have to find out, was the way MIBR played in allowing some of that? Did he sometimes play selfishly at the expense of someone else to be able to do? I don't know these things. I can't say that. So I want to see, if he is the IGL, will it come back? If he isn't, will he be missing some of those aspects? And one final detail that I do think is a real issue and a real concern if I'm signing FalleN is this. He has been one of the players in a team that has been consistently resistant to real coaching. Keyword, real coaching. Like, he doesn't seemingly want a coach. Because when it's working, it's like Carrigan. He's the one who has the vision for the game. He's going to implement his vision. And if anything, someone else is going to be in his way or ejecting or interrupting or short-circuiting him, right? The problem is when you're not at your peak and you're not in your prime and they could have maybe shared the load or even had strengths where you have weaknesses and vice versa, maybe then you could have been an even more dynamic, more powerful team combined. So I think you look, Zeus, the second time around, looked to me like they barely ever listened to this guy. I know that guy's an amazing coach in mind for the game. Looked like they never used that. Yanko, they were resistant to a whole bunch of things he was trying to do. I don't think they ever got fully on the same page with him. Now, the problem with that is you can say all day long, well, Yanko was in a couple of teams, he never got the championship. Zeus is a major winner many times in loads of finals. And after what he did in Team Liquid, every player in MIBR should have 100% been buying into what he was saying and his way of playing the game. So to me, being open to coaching, in this case, is going to be Moses, who obviously is in a tricky spot himself because he respects FalleN so much. And I wonder how much he's going to push back and battle with him or maybe get lured into that charisma. Because to me, having a coach who will actually put this guy's feet to the fire and bring out the best of him and make him a key part of the team is going to be essential to him rediscovering the greatness that obviously lies within, but we just haven't seen much in the last year and a half or so, maybe 2 years realistically, if I'm thinking back on that long. Now, since this is an NA org, and at some point they're going to go back to NA, and they're not just going to be in EU forever, I assume, and they all presumably want to live in America, right, it gets trickier then to get Europeans at this point in time for obvious reasons. Visas, can they even travel at this point in time? So in my opinion, this is actually a good gamble. It is a gamble, let's be real, but it's one that's worth doing. Either he comes in, he's a contributor, they get back in their winning ways, he does fill some of those holes, or you just let him go with ease and you have your conscience clean that, hey, I gave it a chance, I gave it a crack, I don't have to wonder what if, but he's gone. Now, if he can't make this work though, let's be real, cultural stuff aside, that will be very underwhelming for me because there are some fantastic pieces in this team. And just like I said when Moses joined as coach, if you're joining this team as an IGL or as a coach, you almost couldn't ask for a better set of players or talents or tools in your kit from which to work. So if it doesn't work out, I'm going to have to look at you and ask, what did you do in the equation? Like, how did you not manage to use these pieces correctly? What does that mean? Now, it doesn't mean I'm just going to dismiss you, but I'm going to ask that question. So my issue here is, they have some fantastic players in MIBR and SK over the last few years. Like, he had Coldzera for KNG, Phelps. He had some players who all, except for Coldzera basically, all had some issues under him, all had times where they were fantastic under him, but they always had the skill, but it was always a mixed bag as to what they did with it. So he's already had a team like a Team Liquid, and now he's going towards another team. It's a lot of skilled players, a lot of players with their own mentality on how they're going to play the game. And he has to be the godfather again, this time not of Brazilian CS, of NA CS, I guess. So I actually think it's a pretty good move. This video was kindly supported by Lagger15, Pronogo, Andrew, Dean Tanglis, Animosity, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Jensen Goh, Zoomba, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Want to ask a question in one of my monthly video AMAs? Do you want teasers? See who's going to be on my next interviews and shows? Maybe you want to take part in a discussion with me where we go anywhere. We had a mad one talking about chess the other month. If so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today at the link in the description box below.